When giving a presentation, it's really important to make a good start. You want to say clearly who you are and what you're going to be speaking about. For example, my name is Noel-Ann Bradshaw, and I'm going to be talking to you about how to give better presentations. So it's a good idea to have a well-written opening slide, and also you want to have a slide with an outline that tells the audience what your presentation is going to be about. If you are doing a group presentation, you also want to introduce the members of your group. Some lecturers use this as an opportunity to put names to faces if they're not quite sure who the students are in the group. So it might be something like, my name is Noel-Ann Bradshaw, and this is my colleague, Tony Mann. Try not to mumble at the beginning, as it makes it very hard to understand what the presentation is about and the audience might get very lost. In case you didn't hear what I said try not to mumble at the beginning, because it makes it very hard for the audience to hear what the presentation is about. If you're doing a group presentation, you might want to get one of your best communicators on at the start and again at the end, as these are really important parts of the presentation. It's really important that you open well and that the audience is aware of what the presentation is about. The presentation needs to be professional, but above all, interesting and engaging. You need to be lively. For example, you might want to walk around, you might want to wave your arms around and generally get really enthusiastic, because that makes the audience sit up and take notice. Think about the ways in which your lecturers present. Think about a lecture that has been particularly exciting, or a lecturer that you find particularly interesting. What do they do in order to get your attention? Another trap that people fall into is they look at the screen. This means that all you can see is the back of my head, which frankly isn't particularly interesting. So you probably didn't hear what I said when I was facing the screen. It's much more interesting to be talking to the audience. A presenter also needs to make eye contact with the audience. What I try and do is I look at different parts of the room and I make contact with different people in the audience, as long as they're awake, of course. You might also want to consider using props of some kind. It helps the audience to get more of a feel of the subject, and it makes the lecture, the presentation, more interesting. So here are some props that I've used with different lectures in the past. So Rubik's Cube, and sometimes when I'm giving taster events with prospective students, I might show them how to make a square into a circle, and then back again. In a group presentation, you might consider doing a role play or asking the audience a question. Anything like this that breaks the presentation up can be good, although you don't want to do too much of it. Some of you might remember the role play that Tony and I did when Tony was teaching group theory to first-year maths students. Hopefully that helps you to remember the lecture on group theory. The look of your slides is also important. There needs to be a clear, legible font. You don't want to fall into the trap of having the sort of colour scheme where you just can't see what is on the slide. These are some examples of colour schemes and font sizes that our students have used in the past. It's also important when you have pictures on the slide that they don't obscure the text. Again, it's important that you don't have too much font, too much text on the slide. For example, with the text that we've got here, I've summarised this into a few bullet points, which I think you'll agree is much easier to see like this than in a whole chunk of writing. You want to make sure that your slides, the look of your slides, enhances your presentation and doesn't detract from it. That's also the case with animation. Some students love to use animation, so they'll use a lot of different sorts of animation, which frankly I find make me feel rather sick. So we've got a number of different examples here of text appearing and then disappearing. The other trap that students fall into is that they might produce a slide which is all black and white. The text is clear, but it's not very interesting. What I would suggest is that you have slides where the font is clear, it's legible, but you also make use of pictures. Pictures can be photographs that you've taken, or you can just use the clip art actually in PowerPoint. You want to create slides that enhance what you're saying, not detract from it. Preparation, preparation, preparation. This is so important. If you don't practice your presentation, it really is not going to be so good. If you're doing a group presentation, you must practice with your group. You need to practice the timing, but you need to practice the interchange between different people speaking. Make sure everyone has something to say, and help and encourage those who are more nervous. It's easy to criticise and to say that so-and-so isn't as good, but actually it's your responsibility to take them to one side and help them to practice and improve. Tony, do you want to be shot again? I'm not going to put the slide up, but here's an example of where you might want to practice. When your group is presenting, it's really important that you listen to everyone who is speaking. So you're not going to be speaking for all of the time. You're not going to be speaking for much of the time, really. So when you're not speaking, you must be listening and not fidgeting or playing with your mobile phone or sitting down. You also need to keep your presentation to time. If you've been asked to speak for 10 minutes, then don't do it for 7 or 12 or 13. If you're presenting at the university, you're probably being assessed and marked. You will lose marks if you're too short or too long. If you're presenting at a job interview and you've been asked to speak for 10 minutes, if you don't do enough or you do too much, you're probably not going to get the job. So if you're shown a card with 2 minutes on it, that means that you've got 2 minutes left. You might want to be a few slides away from the end, but certainly coming towards the end. If you're shown the 1 minute card, you probably need to be on the conclusion slide. What you don't want to do is start talking very, very quickly to make sure that you come to the end within that 2 minutes or 1 minute. As you can see, it's not easy to hear what someone is saying when they're talking very quickly. So if you're several slides away from where you want to be, skip through some of the slides and get to near the end point. Try not to read from notes. I like to have notes in my hand in case my mind goes blank so I can refer to them, but I don't usually read from them. Hopefully you can tell that when I'm reading from the notes, then my voice is quite dull, quite monotonous, and it's not so interesting. I know that sometimes students get nervous and they like to have their props with them, they like to have their notes, but try not to read from them. If you're being assessed, reading from a script can actually show the lecturer that perhaps you don't know as much about the subject as you should. We have mentioned also that you don't want to be presenting looking at the screen. So if you're reading from notes or reading from the screen, you're not going to be looking at the audience. You might want to make mention of a quote. Now that's fine. You can just go to the side, you can look at the monitor and say, reading tends to focus your thoughts on your notes, thus losing contact with your audience. But what you don't want to do is to turn your back, Reading can also reduce your voice to a monotone, removing energy and enthusiasm from your delivery. Try not to come to a sudden end. Students do this all the time. You need to prepare some sort of summary, some sort of conclusion, which shows the audience what you have covered. So I hope that this has helped you to understand some points about how to improve your presentation skills. And I'm really looking forward to hearing a lot more enthusiastic and lively presentations as a result of this presentation. Thank you for listening.